And now I'd like to present Nick Norman. Nick, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chris. Thanks everyone for joining. As she mentioned, my name is Nick Norman. I am one of these Sky Enterprise OneConfig system engineers, and we're going to go through a few slides today. And then I also have with me John Rice. John, you want to give a introduction?
Hi, I'm John Rice, also SE for Sky Enterprise and OneConfig, and I'll be working with Nick to present today's webinar.
Thanks, John. So our agenda for today, we're going to do a little bit of an overview about Sky Enterprise. We're going to talk kind of a high level, what is zero-touch provisioning. We're going to go through how ZTP works from a device perspective and from a Sky Enterprise perspective. We're going to talk about supported Junos devices for zero-touch provisioning. And then we're going to do ZTP for the first time and then go into some advanced ZTP options. And then towards the end there, we'll go through the ordering guide and then some coming soon new features and talk about the free trial at the end. So, and specifically ZTP is zero touch provisioning. And what we're talking about here today is cloud-based ZTP. So just a little bit of an overview about Sky Enterprise. If you haven't seen it before, don't know what it is, it's cloud-based offering delivered as a service. It supports the entire EX line, the entire QFX line, all of the VSRXs, the entire SRX line, and the entire NFX line. So any of those devices can be added to Sky Enterprise. We connect to those devices, or they connect to us, making an outbound SSH call. And then we have centralized visibility and control of the device and the configuration as well. So you can still use the device's CLI as well as interact with the device through our UI. And when we make changes to the device, we exclusively lock the config, push that change, commit confirm 5 minutes automatically. And then that second commit is automatically confirmed as long as the device stays connected to Sky. If it disconnects, it rolls that back. Very intuitive, powerful interface for anybody from advanced engineering down to folks that may not know Junos very well. We have Wi-Fi MIST integration, and we also have support for the Wi-Fi PIM card that you can install into a SRX in PIM. And then we also support multi-tenancy and RBAC, or role-based access controls. Talk a little bit about who's using Sky Enterprise cloud-based ZTP. So global clothing retailer. So we have a very large retailer in the clothing industry that has done thousands of ZTPs for their devices. They went through a 12-month refresh and replaced Cisco devices with Juniper. And as I mentioned, they've done thousands of devices using Sky Enterprise ZTP. We also have a wholesale network service provider in the EU. They do business-grade WAN services deployed using Juniper SRX, leveraging ZTP. So, a big benefit there is they get faster and more cost-effective than pre-staging devices, double shipping them to a staging facility or sending engineers on site. We also have a global financial services company. They're doing an emergency rollout of SRX devices to support hundreds of work-from-home employees. Very on topic here with, hope everyone is staying healthy, by the way, but very on topic here with recent events. Engineering supplies wholesaler in the US. They're rolling out a network refresh project across 275 sites using cloud-based ZTP with Sky Enterprise for all of these. And then lots of medical companies in Sky, lots of medical companies using ZTP. This one in particular is upgrading their network devices in clinics across 10 states. So what is cloud-based zero-touch provisioning? Devices are now shipping with this phone home client. Makes an outbound connection to Sky Enterprise there. So we're kind of showing the number one, the device is plugged into the network. So on an SRX, port 0, and then the first fiber port is also set up for a DHCP client. Also over the LTE 4G modem, those devices now have pre-configured profiles. Like 18 months ago, there was 160 LTE profiles in the factory default config. I'm sure there's way more than that now. But effectively, that LTE card can just connect to the network with no configuration. And then port 0 and port 7 are set up for a DHCP client from the default. And then on an EX, the management port could be used. It's set up for DHCP client, as well as any of the front-facing ports. They're also access ports, and they're in the default VLAN IRB 0. So they will, the device will boot up, request an IP address from the network, and then it'll go through that process of making that SSL connection, phoning home to the redirect server that comes into Sky Enterprise if this is a registered Sky Enterprise device, and then we'll ask for authorization. At that point, the device requests a configuration from Sky Enterprise, and it downloads that from us, and then it goes through the standard commit process. You know, it merges that with the factory default config. By default, it goes through a merge process with the config templates. So we're going to go through those some of those later. And as you know, as part of that, we add the Sky Enterprise connector, the outbound SSH connector, so that your device will be online in the platform at the end of the phone home ZTP process. Another slide here talking about how Cloud ZTP works with Juniper Sky Enterprise. You know, that box can now be shipped right out to the site, or you know, we've even seen pop-up type of businesses, you know, where they're using these devices, you know, to deploy the pop-up site. It just phones home. It identifies itself via the serial number, and that's how we tie the configuration to the correct device. Those serial numbers, you can get those on the side of the box. You know, we have partners and customers that are scanning those in with readers. Also, when those are ordered, when partners order those, there's a list of serial numbers that they get that's coming. So you can just allocate those serial numbers to different sites, and then they know which site is getting which serial number. We also have a inventory sheet in Sky where you can pull down those serial numbers as well. So talk about, you know, here some of the supported versions of code where this started. So on the SRXs, 15.1x 49D100 and later. On the EXs, really 18.2 R3 S1 is where phone home ZTP is working well. The NFX is, you know, quite a while back. 15.1x 53 on the 250s and 18 version on 150s, and then currently QFXs do not support phone home ZTP, nor do the MXs. And all these devices are shipping with these versions. So if you order a device today, it will ship with the phone home enabled ZTP code on it. So, you know, a basic zero touch provisioning, or going through this for the first time, you know, again, that device you powered on, you plug it in, it's gonna make that phone home connection. You have a Sky Enterprise account, so you'll need to be able to, you know, to log into Sky Enterprise, be able to create devices, add templates, and then, you know, for true ZTP, no touch, you want a network that supports DHCP. It's going to hand out an address, possibly time server, name servers. Those other elements are important as well. So stepping through this in a little bit more detail here, you know, the first step would be, you know, we're showing a, I think it's a, don't know what device that is. Looks like a switch. So we're showing a switch device here, maybe plugging that into the network, powering it on. It's going to make that phone home connection. You know, once it gets an address, it gets network reachability, it can resolve DNS names, it has the correct time. It's going to make this phone home every 60 seconds. And again, on the SRXs, port 0. On the EXs, any of these front-facing ports or the management port. Step 2 here, you'll need to create a template in Sky Enterprise. We have a GitHub repo full of ZTP templates. That's the link here down at the bottom. I've got it up in my browser here. I'll show in a little bit, but lots of different templates for lots of different kind of projects, whether it's EXs or SRXs or NFXs. There's a template out there for all those different devices, and there's different templates for our different regions. So we have a region, the EU has its own servers, and the US has their own servers. So there's templates out there for US, and there's templates out there for the EU. Just like adding a device, not doing ZTP, right? You go through the same process. So you add the device, and essentially you give it a name, you pick what it is, and then the category, and then here you pick that it is a ZTP device. So I am checking the box. We're inputting the serial number here for the device for identification, and then I'm picking a template out of the drop-down box, and then any variable in the template gets pulled in here and displayed for me to fill out. So, you know, some of those customers I talked about earlier, more senior level engineer folks build templates, and junior folks deploy devices here where they're filling in the host names, you know, that sort of thing. Some of the ISPs I've worked with doing ZTP, they have field techs that are doing some of this work. It really just depends on what works best for that customer. And then once you have that ZTP device created on this configuration and then ZTP tab here, we have a new ZTP device, and we can see the template that's bound to it. We can also go look at its configuration post variables. So like when I filled out that variable of the host name, under the action menu here, I'll see that. I can also go in here and authorize the device, as well as I'll get that authorization email. So I could click the link. Right. I think now we're going to invite John to share his screen. Go through some real live examples.
All right. So bear with me 1 second while I share my screen.
I'll maybe address one of these questions, John, as you're getting shared there. What will be the difference between CSO and GFW and Sky Enterprise? And I think a big thing about Sky Enterprise, I'll talk about that, is that Sky Enterprise reads the device config in real time. So other management platforms and even other vendors don't do it this way. They read or they use a cache version of the config. And the key here is that you can still use the CLI interface. So you can make any changes to the device, and Sky Enterprise, the next time you go to that section, so let's say you made an interface change, the next time you load the interfaces page, Sky Enterprise is going to read that in real time. Other vendors and even other management platforms don't work in this fashion. So that's one of the main differences between Sky Enterprise and other management platforms. So if you have customers that are doing things like their own internal tools, maybe they've got some tools that they want to use along with a management platform, Sky Enterprise is a very good pick for that.
Thanks, Nick.
Yep. Okay,
so hopefully everyone can see my screen.
Yep.
What we've got here is the default landing page for Sky Enterprise, which hopefully most of you will be familiar with already. What we're going to go through here is, so there are many videos already available and webinars in the past that show sort of a straightforward vanilla ZTP process. What we really want to do here was illustrate kind of an alternate use case for ZTP, where maybe we're looking to onboard a brownfield or an existing device into the platform. So the device is already deployed into the network. We're looking to adopt the device into Sky Enterprise with a path of least resistance. And this can be done quite easily and following mostly very similar steps to those that Nick's already kind of covered at a high level. So I'm going to go ahead and begin to add this brownfield device, much like I would with any other device. So existing device. Select the category, tick that I want to create a ZTP device. I'm then going to pop the serial number of the device in there. And I'm going to use my brownfield deployment template. No variables to enter. This is simply going to add the required configuration into an existing configuration. So Nick mentioned during his introduction that this is a merge. So familiar with an SRX, we're doing a configuration merge using this template. In a moment, we'll go and look at this template so you can see what it contains. So I'm going to go ahead and create this device. And the device we're working with is actually a lab device. It's this one here. So you see I've got the serial number up on screen. And at the moment, this is an existing device doing its thing. It has access to the internet. It's all good. And here I've got my existing device currently offline. It's not got any configuration to tell it to connect to Sky Enterprise, but we use that brownfield template. So if we go take a look at that particular template, you'll see here's the placeholder, the ZTP device placeholder. So it's waiting for this to connect in order to begin the ZTP process. And this is the template that we gave to the device. So very straightforward, very simple. There's some prerequisites for creating a template to use with ZTP. They're written in XML, which enables a very efficient transfer of configuration between the SRX or the EX and the server. And in here, we create effectively what is a Sky Enterprise configurer using the XML configuration. So we create the Sky Enterprise username for the device. and we create the 2 outbound SSH connections to the 2 Sky Enterprise device servers. We're not adding anything else. We don't need to. The device already has like an operational configuration. And we can see what that will actually look like. So we can go to this ZTP device and look at the actual configuration we're going to deploy. So you'll see, again, the serial number, important to tie the device to the whole process. The Sky Enterprise username and the encrypted passwords, it's already encrypted, along with the outbound SSH client details. So the name, the server it's going to connect to, and the shared secret that it uses to authorize that outbound SSH connection. This is quite simple. It's, like I say, the configuration you would add manually if you're adding a device manually to the platform. It's just a configurelet converted into XML using a template. This can be done once or many times. So the key to making all this work is the phone home component of the SRX. Because as we're dealing with an existing brownfield location where the device has already been installed and running for a period of time, there is no phone home configuration on the device. So if we did show configuration system on this, there's no outbound SSH, and there's no username in there. So it's existing device with some configuration, but no outbound SSH configuration. So in order to do that, I'm going to go into configuration mode, and I'm just going to grab the configuration that I know it needs. Now, you can do this by running load factory default. So these are the lines we're going to add. I'm going to roll that back, so I don't want to load the factory default configuration. And I'm going to add these 2 bits of configuration in. So from the diagrams that Nick was showing earlier in the presentation, this is a key component. That's the Juniper hosted server that the factory default device will phone home to, and will redirect your device to the Sky Enterprise ZTP server to commence the provisioning of the device. So I'm going to go ahead, add this into the device, hit commit. Once that configuration is committed, the device will begin the phone home process. It'll start roughly within 60 seconds, and then every 60 seconds following that, it will begin to poll the redirect server for an available ZTP service in this case. Because we've added the device to Sky Enterprise, it will go to the Sky Enterprise server. So again, the device is waiting to go online. So over here, we've got the device currently offline. It's never connected. It didn't know to connect up until this point. And then within the configuration tab, we have the ZTP device waiting for our attention. There is also an email notification that goes out with this as part of the standard ZTP process. And you can see here, we now got authorization required. So if I do authorize on that, device has been authorized, shows that the state has changed here, and the ZTP process has effectively begun to commence. Now all we do is wait for that to commit onto the device. So we go back to, we will also get an email notification to confirm once the device is reached a what's called a Bootstrap complete status, which is when the phone home has received its configuration, committed it successfully, and then closed down the phone home process. During that process, we'll also see occasionally updates here in terms of what the device is doing. So if this were to fail for some reason, maybe I mistyped the configuration template or entered some invalid data, this state would change to an error state. As it is, we all hope that this will turn into a successful, configuration. The device is none the wiser as to what's going on. And we begin waiting.
And I'll just add on kind of, what John and I were kind of working on with the customer was they had a large number of devices, and they wanted to add them to Sky Enterprise in the most efficient way possible, but their they're brownfield devices that they already exist out in the field. So, we explored a couple different options with them. And this is kind of the option. One of the options that we talked about was the ability to add one single command, which is turning on the redirect server, and then slipping in the Sky Enterprise connector into the device. And that's kind of what we're going through here. I mean, there's other use cases, but that was kind of the one that drove our kind of thoughts about showing this use case. I thought it was pretty interesting.
Because we're adding such a small amount of configuration that's not specific to the device. So if we go, we can see here the state has changed to Bootstrap complete, by the way. So the device has completed the ZTP process, and shortly thereafter, we should see, yeah, so the device is now online. It's picked up the model of the device, and effectively we've now onboarded that device using two lines of configuration. In so much as all we had to add to the device was these 2 lines here for phone home. So for a customer that's looking to onboard a number of devices that are already out in the field, already operational, which deviates slightly from the traditional discussions around ZTP being a greenfield only, you have to order a device with a compatible version of software from the factory, have it shipped to the site and plug it in. That's true, obviously, for any greenfield deployment. What we have here is an example of effectively onboarding existing devices using the exact same process. The only requirement would be to find a means to add these 2 lines of configuration to those existing devices. But because they're not device specific, there's no unique identity or IP address or usernames, passwords need to be pushed. This can be done using an existing management tool, or an intermediary management tool, such as a SolarWinds tool, or even something as simple as an SNMP push to a device. With that configuration in place and committed onto an SRX, as you've just seen, we're able to onboard an existing device into the platform and then take full management of the device from here. Okay, Nick, where do we want to go next from here?
Yeah, you want to go into since you're already sharing, you want to go into the NetConf session, or you want to do some?
Yeah, so we were talking about how to craft templates from, obviously we've shared, Nick's mentioned, and I'm currently sharing kind of a library of kind of basic cookie cutter templates, if you like, templates that we've used and that we typically distribute to Juniper SEs or customers and partners when they first subscribe to Sky Enterprise. And often the question's asked, well, that's great. How can I take, like an existing configuration and convert that into like a working ZTP template? And it can be a source of great frustration. And I think there's a couple of things to point out. Often there's a belief that you can just do show config pipe display XML and take that and drop it into ZTP and it will just work. Unfortunately, it's not that simple. It's no different to running a show config on an existing device and expecting it just to work when you did a load merge on another device. That device, even at factory default, has existing configuration that needs to be taken into account. ZTP adds in some extra elements. So when we look at how to maybe author our own ZTP templates, we can take that show. So if I did on here, for example, show configuration pipe display XML, there is an amount of information here that can be used, could be drafted into a template. But it's important to note that some of it will need variables. So what works on one device wouldn't necessarily work on another device. So we need to introduce variables. And we also need to be cognizant of the format, that there are some specific things that need to be included within a ZTP template. Going to this resource here, the GitHub repo for Juniper Sky Enterprise, there's actually a README file that begins to cover this. There is a Juniper Tech Docs article also on the Juniper website, which goes into some of this detail, but I think this specifically relates to these templates and is a useful resource. So it talks about defining the template, what absolutely needs to be there. fields such as the unique ID. Obviously, we need to be able to identify a device by its serial number, and as it's a template, we need that to be a variable. The Sky Enterprise system has a number of system variables that we will expect, or at least be able to populate from a template. This is one of them. We also, outside of what you would normally expect to see in an XML configuration, have some additional configuration and config tags. So if we go back to the actual SRX here, you'll see as part of the XML configuration, we do have already a configuration tag. We still need to have configuration and config outside of that. So where these three dots sit here is the beginning of what you would expect to be the typical SRX configuration. In addition to that, factory default, we have auto installation, which needs to be deleted from the device during the ZTP process. That's one of those things that needs to be taken into consideration. And in addition to that, any configuration we're intending to overwrite, because we're doing, Phone Home does a merge by default. If we merge conflicting configuration, it will fail to commit and the process will error out. So you'll see, excuse me, you will see here in the document, it talks about deleting individual elements. So here we're deleting an individual interface. In the example templates, what you'll actually find is a slightly more sort of brutal approach, if you like. We can, for all of the top level configuration elements, we can delete the entirety of that top level, with the exception of the system top level. The reason for that is if you remove the system configuration, it removes the Phone Home daemon prematurely, and that can have well, I guess, unexpected effect on the ZTP process in terms of understanding whether it's succeeded or failed and other elements. So just important things to note. So here in the basic template, we take those top level for security interface protocols, access and VLANs, we delete them completely. We modify the system top level by removing auto installation, adding in here a variable. So again, we talked about variables. This is a user-defined variable of host name. So we can insert that into the ZTP process. And then we have the, again, as we saw with the brownfield deployment, we have here the username that Sky Enterprise is going to use. And all of the variables marked as ZTP underscore are system variables that we populated by Sky Enterprise as part of the process. So the username, the password, and in addition, the outbound SSH components here. After that, we go into what is effectively, so if I go down to, to security, we've deleted security. So if you imagine on the CLI, it's no different to doing, delete security, and then I begin set security. And we have here a number of configurations for security and the other elements such as interfaces. We've started to define an entirely new configuration. So in defining and designing your own configurations, you can indeed start with show configuration pipe display XML. You would need to take that configuration and you'd need to consider how to draft that into an existing template. And in order to assist with that, one of the things that we've done is create what we've called a blank template. So here we've got an example of a blank XML template. And this is written with this in mind. So we've still got the deletes here. We've still got the system configuration here, which may need modifying for customized purposes. But once we get past system, we replace this effectively with a configuration. So if we were to, example, take this device here and do show protocols, show configuration protocols. We could, for example, here take our protocol configuration and drop that straight into a template here. So you can using either an editor of your choice or within the Sky Enterprise platform directly, create a new template. And begin to build within this. So we can take you know, the entirety of this. Paste that into there and start to build our own configuration. So we've got this here. And as you can see, you can basically start to build out your own XML template based on what you know to be a working configuration. It's completely extensible. So provided the basic rules are followed around, it has to be valid XML, it has to be a configuration that's valid, can be committed to the device. This is a perfectly reasonable way to start to build and test an XML configuration. And in terms of that, I've included with this document, this README that we have here, some steps that are important and useful in order to do that. So once you've got to the point where you have a working configuration or working template, you can start to do some template testing. There's a number of methods to do this. This is definitely delving into the more advanced use of the platform. So if you wanted to use a basic ZTP template, get a device online, that's fine. This allows you to start to define your own templates and start to see whether they're going to work. Unlike sort of traditional configuration, which is obviously written in a set format or within Juniper's stanza configuration, the XML can't just be dropped directly into the CLI of a device. So in order to start doing some testing, we've got a few steps here to help simulate phone home. So again, we have the load factory default. In order to commit that, obviously we need a root password. Once we have that, this line here allows you to test an XML configuration. So in this example, what I've advised is creating an XML file here in var temp. And I'm then going to, this whole line here can actually be seen in the logs of an SRX, for example, when you're running phone home. And what we're doing here is replicating the precise same steps. So executing it's actually a Slack script that's leveraged by phone home against the XML file that we've dropped onto the device. And we're following the merge in the format of XML. What we see here, though, is in doing so, in this example that's documented here, we see an error. In this particular example, I'd made a typo and I'd put the same interface into two zones, which gave me a commit fail. So getting to that point really only requires you to have created a template and added your test device. And then using the show device configuration, you get this merged, populated configuration that you can then test. If we were to, Nick, if we've got time, I can probably demonstrate that if you're happy to do that.
Yeah.
All right, let's do that then. Okay, so if we go onto the device we just added to the platform, rollback 1, I think. No, rollback.
Yeah, so right there, I'll just point that out. The device is removing the phone home after a ZTP process automatically, right?
Yeah. I'm going to delete the system.
And it's probably worth saying this again because it's a very common issue we see is that by default, this is a merge. So when you're building a template, like on an SRX, port 1 is family Ethernet switching. It's part of the default VLAN that comes from the factory config. So if you wanted to set that as family iNet, you would want to delete the interface first and then set it as family iNet or something of that nature, right? But that's a very common problem that we see in building these ZTP templates out, is that be cognizant of what is in the factory default, and it's a merge by default.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's kind of where this testing really kind of comes into play. Now, we're not sort of expecting this to fail, but I think it's kind of a useful illustration. So as I said before, in order to test this as a valid configuration, we have to take some steps. So you'll see in this piece here. So copying the populated XML between the inner configuration tags. So we've got the inner configuration tags. We've now got a valid XML configuration. I'm just using a text editor here to make life a little bit easier and maybe a little bit easier for everybody to see. I've now got that copied to my clipboard, and on the SRX, oh dear. I just create that file in the shell. There's a number of ways you could do this. You can, if your device is connected in a lab, something where you're doing your testing, effectively all you really need to do is get this file onto the device. I've been known to use a local HTTP server or SCP the file to the device, but this is only a small configuration. I've used by, so that's really as simple as that. So there's my file. And we go back to the process here. So what we're going to do is execute this command here against that file. So that's the entirety of it. Op URL, the PHCD, which is the name Junos gives to the phone home daemon that runs for phone home, and the file name, the merge, and the format of the file. It's not a complicated Slack script, and it's very portable and useful for these kind of testing purposes. When we run that command, I'm expecting this to work, but it's a good way of showing that you can take your intended XML configuration, pop it onto a test device. So you've written a template, you've added it to Sky Enterprise, you've added a device to simulate deploying the device, and you've been able to view that populated or merged configuration from the portal. You've taken the configuration that you're intending to deploy perhaps into the field as an example. You've dropped it directly onto the SRX, and you've tested it. At this point, we now can be quite confident that we've got a committed or committable configuration. The template's good, it populates correctly. We can go ahead now and start using this in anger. You would presumably use some more testing in the lab, but you've moved beyond design of the template stage. You've got something that will commit, is valid XML, and can be used on the device. So that's effectively the process for customizing, creating your own XML templates, looking at how you can take an existing configuration, creating your own custom template based off of that, testing it against the device. There is one more thing to maybe to look at in terms of if, for example, this didn't commit. We had an error in the configuration, and this didn't give us the kind of information we wanted. I've written a document, and we'll actually update this README with this information shortly after we've done this webinar. But I discovered another way of doing some deep diving into the testing of an XML template. That allows us to do something, again, akin to what's being done during the ZTP process, but allows a little bit more visibility of what's being done. With this, we use an interactive netconf session directly on the device. We load the same configuration. We still use a merge. We still use the format of XML. What we don't do is attempt to commit it at this point. so I used this. I kind of stumbled across this when configuration wouldn't commit, and it just gave me at a commit layer. It just gave me a syntax error. However, when I looked at basically loading the configuration without the commit, it started to tell me about there was some, a bad element effectively in my configuration. So what I was able to see here, just skipping forward a little bit over that, was I could drop out of the netconf session and back onto the device without having tried to commit configuration. So I'd loaded the config into the effectively as a candidate configuration. When I was able to look at what had been loaded on the device, I could see that the configuration only got so far in terms of it being valid, and that allowed me to see that I'd added incorrectly to system services part of security zone, and this effectively highlighted the problem. It's perhaps a little overly ornate and intricate, but it's another option for diagnosing and troubleshooting those issues. And one of the questions that's just popped up on the Q&A was, can you get a copy of this document? Yes, so the indication at the beginning of this was I will actually, so you may notice there's a similarity between the README file here and the document I was just showing. What I will do is ensure that this is updated. So this has got a couple of extra bits of information in it. I will add that to the README here. So keep an eye on the Sky Enterprise GitHub repo URLs at the top of the screen, and you will see more templates, an update to this document, and that way that information will be disseminated. I think it's one of the areas where, when dealing with XML templates, people have in the past at least lacked some documented information to work with. This was the beginnings of that, and some of the extra bits we just talked about will go some way towards closing that gap. Okay. Nick,
awesome.
I think over to you.
Sounds great. So a couple things I just want to mention as we're thinking about ZTP and some of the other kind of projects that John and I have worked on. So some EX models are shipping with virtual chassis ports configured from the factory. And why this is important is that, let's say I wanted a ZTP, so we've got a customer who wanted a ZTP virtual chassis, right? So fortunately, they had the models with virtual chassis ports that were already set from factory. So we could ZTP the first member and then leverage the virtual chassis config synchronization and software upgrade functionality so that the other members could just be plugged in. So in the initial ZTP of the routing engine, the first switch, we have pre-provisioned the other members and use the functionality of templating in Sky Enterprise to create variables for each member, so that when you create this, you can input the serial number per member. So then as those devices are plugged in, this serial number becomes a line card, this one becomes the backup RE, this one becomes a line card type of thing, and all their ports are then correctly mapped, and, becomes member 1, member 2, member 3 as they come online. So interesting, way to leverage kind of some of the inherent ways things work along with ZTP. Another interesting one, I think John kind of worked this one out primarily, was at one point there was a problem in Junos where when the device went through the ZTP process, it thought it had an address. So after ZTP, it would no longer be on the network because it wouldn't request it thought it had an address, but it didn't. And so a little way to work that out was to run an RPM probe. And if that probe fails, restart the chassis D, right? So effectively working around a bug in Junos. So really I'm illustrating this to say that anything you can express in Junos pretty much can be pushed through in a ZTP template. So there's a lot of interesting things and a lot of interesting ways to interact with a Junos device using ZTP and Sky Enterprise. the other one was building clusters. So you could ZTP both members of an SRX cluster. In that one, you have to fetch a file, but fetching that file and then building the cluster, and then at the end of ZTP, you plug the two members together and the cluster is formed. I think you're showing here, John, switch upgrades, so doing upgrades as part of ZTP. So you can go fetch, the device can check, am I running this version of code when it boots? And if not, where do I go get the correct version of code? So you can do code upgrades as part of the ZTP process. At least I think that's what you wanted to express there, John.
Yeah, sorry, I realized that I was still showing my screen, and it was, while we're talking about the extensibility of ZTP, things like software upgrades. So the major US clothing retailers, as an example, have made extensive use of upgrading code on SRXs and NFXs using this process. A couple of key points. I think it mentions it in the notes there, but the image, GNOS image, has to be hosted on a server that is accessible to both the device and to Sky Enterprise ZTP servers. That's part of a secure URL proxying process that is intended to protect everybody involved in the process. So you know that the image that makes it to your device hasn't been intercepted in some way. And in there is included some MD5 and SHA-1 hashes as well. Probably the strangest thing, if you look at the URL, we use the vertical pipe instead of the expected slash. And that is really just to work around some of the strangeness of the phone home setup. So it's, without going into too much detail, it's if you want to go and dig out the phone home RFC from the internet, there is an RFC for phone home. Juniper's implementation of it is a little different or unusual in some respects, and this is one of them. So the path is typically expected to be on the phone home server itself rather than on an external server. So what we did was write a wrapper for that allowed effectively the software that we run on our ZTP server will interpret what you put into the template here as part of the path and return that to the device in a way that it can understand. It sounds complicated. I've probably overcomplicated it, but the most important thing is just to note the way that it's written. And it also explains how you could, in theory, include that as a variable into your template. Anything to a certain extent that's between tags can be converted into a variable on a ZTP template. And yeah, sorry, Nick, I just wanted to,
more slides.
I thought that was an important thing to cover. I will stop my screen sharing and allow you to resume your slides.
Right. A few more slides. Just got to go through ordering and how devices map. So it's like a small device, a medium device, a large device. All features are included as part of that license 1, 3, and 5 years. So like an SRX 300 or EX 2300, or even in older models, we still support the SRX, the 100s, the 210s, or the EX 2200s. Those would be Group A. Larger devices like the 340s are Group B on the SRXs, and in the 1500s are Group C and up. Yeah, kind of got that illustrated here, showing those devices and how they map. Somebody asked about getting accounts. So this is the customer facing. So if you have partners or customers that want to get signed up, this is the the Sky Enterprise. Juniper.net/try, I believe, is all the trials page now, and there's a link on there for Sky Enterprise, but this is the direct URL. They get a 30-day free trial, or just give it a Google, and then I dropped the URL for Juniper employees in the link. So if you're a Juniper employee, send your link to skyent-trial@juniper.net. I'll try to update that answer with the, I think we are kind of at the end of the time here, so we've got just a few minutes left. We'll hang around for some questions. And want to thank everybody for taking time away from quarantine, and hope everyone is staying healthy. And yeah, please let us know how we can help or answer questions. Go ahead.
Thanks, Nick. Thank you, guys.